Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I'm Jess.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Night of the Comet, which came out in 1984, written and directed by Thom Eberhardt.
Well, Gary, what is the synopsis?
Well, the story follows Regina Belmont, played by Catherine Mary Stewart, and sister Samantha Belmont, played by Kelli Maroney. Two valley girls who must fight to survive against mutant cannibals, sinister scientists, after a comet wipes out nearly all life on the planet. It was the last thing on Earth they ever expected, as the last time it came, the dinosaurs disappeared.
And here's some other changes. Most of you guys had finals this week. Later. They're history. They're canceled.
It is a cheesy 80s film. Just to say this from the very opening credits, where you have a voiceover. Well, actually, no, that voiceover is very classic 60s sort of TV. It's just that retro kind of came from outer space.
Yeah, it perfectly sets up the film, though. It sets up the tone. It sets up its sci-fi and almost comedy nature.
It is a desperately beautiful cry to kind of that an era before that era. Again, it is a film harkening back to earlier, more gentle kind of sci-fi, and it definitely is a very wholesomely, gently written, kindly film, and it isn't ill-intended, and it is a horror film, but in the softest.
This is
kindly, gentle-handed
it's
horror.
A PG movie, so you're talking like no nudity, no excessive violence, and very small amounts of gore.
Yeah, the prosthetics are still all right looking, especially the zombification of people.
Oh well, the prosthetics in this were done by David Miller, who's a makeup artist and genius. He did the original Nightmare on Elm Street, doing Freddy Krueger's makeup.
Yeah, no, the makeup I think was generally top-notch throughout. And I mean, sure, it was slightly painted on face, but again, it wasn't bad for the period, and it certainly isn't too bad over the test of time. It's what we talk about, it's still real, which means there's no CGI failing you.
Well, yeah, it's all practical effects. I mean, it should be said, this film had a budget of $700,000, are estimated thereabouts, which, it is an absolute B-movie. Now,
even with inflation,
it's
still a very low budget. Yeah.
It's a very low budget film, and listening to the director and the stars of the film talk, they explain how it was literally a guerrilla filmmaking production. The director often explained to them when doing the takes that they would probably get two takes, but if anything unexpected were to happen or anything were to go awry, just keep filming, because we will run out of film, so we have to do it in this take, and that's what's going in the film. Like sequences later in the film when they've got the deserted LA streets, they had to be there at the crack of dawn and just very quickly, stop the traffic, film the scenes, and then get out of there. They had to employ every trick in the book in order to actually get this film made. And I have to say, this film, watching it, you can see that it was a real labor of love.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, it was. The aesthetic's really good. The red there's a red dust effect for the whole film, basically, and that carries. It really does the whole thing.
Well, let's get into the beginning of the film, because it is pretty much an 80s montage as we see all of these people getting ready for the night of the comet.
It really is.
You got crowded streets and people like getting excited, people having parties. We get introduced to Regina when she's at the cinema. We've got the cinema owner there, or the manager or the boss, like trying to sell these Night of the Comet like headband things.
They're terrible, and the conversation is slightly clunky, should we say? And it is meant to be a background conversation, but you listen to it and you're like, none of this makes much sense. What's going on?
And if you've ever worked in retail or in something like that, then when you're forced to upsell, this
maybe,
junk...
but it did look particularly silly junk. I know it was a prop for the movie.
It also sets up Regina, though, as she's playing this. I think she's playing Tempest on this arcade machine, and she's trying to get her high score, and she gets frustrated when she sees a DMK, somebody else's initials, on the high scoreboard, which has ruined her clean sheet of high scores. I'm like, okay, so she's competitive, but she's in this job, but she can look after herself. And then we get introduced to her sister, who's at home having a party. Absent father, he's in the military, he's away, and she's with a stepmother who she's kind of frustrated with because her stepmother seems to be having an affair with this other guy called Chuck, I think it is. And this is like, straight away you'll realize how good the dialogue is in this film. Sometimes it's cliche, sometimes it's witty, and sometimes it's really, really good. And altogether, it's really effective. But it's the line when she turns to her stepmother and says, "You were born with an asshole, Doris. You don't need Chuck."
You were born with an asshole, Doris. You don't need Chuck.
And swiftly gets slapped across the face. And, according to the actress, she... They did the take a few times, but it just wasn't working. And because they were running out of film, she told the mother actress, just hit me across the face for real so I can give a real reaction. So the slap across the face is a very real slap. But then she slaps her mother back and then gets punched in the face. Just like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, no, that was quite a sharp, real moment where you felt the actual jarring nature of it.
Yes.
And again, these actresses, the two sisters, are both, because of this movie, have triggered a lot of different things. I mean, because it's a film that was written with a strong central intention of being two female protagonists, and the two girls are spunky and interesting. And I think this is a film, which is really not necessarily as rare as I think the modern media make it out to be.
Well,
but strong female protagonists work better sometimes when you're not so obsessed about it, and these two are fun. And it's a low budget film, and the cast in this are actually, there's a few more famous actors that pop up in it. But,
yeah. Well, just to go back to what you were saying earlier about the two female characters, the two leads, is that they were, more so the Samantha character, the inspiration for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon has gone on record in saying that this film highly inspired that. The Valley Girl cheerleader who can, help save the world, essentially.
Yeah, well, this film, obviously, Valley Girl reference, that Valley Girl and Reaper Man are the two films that may have allowed this film to be made in many ways.
Yes.
Because Atlantic, the production company that made this, were very pleased with that and were jumping on the kind of rolling success.
It was the in thing at the time. So
and this film, again, didn't prove that wrong. It made more money than it cost, a lot more money.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't a mega hit when it came out. I mean, there was a lot of big, successful films in 1984.
But it had a reasonably good amount of reviews, and it was also one of the early PG-13 films. So again, this film did quite well, and I mean, it is forgotten more because of the year it was out in and the nature of making. There's so many films that come out that you're going to slip beneath the waves.
Yeah, this unfortunately was one of them, but it has grown in popularity over the last few decades, especially.
Yeah, because it seems to it's not at all. I mean, up to it is all really well put together. This is the one thing I'll say about it. It does feel like a cohesive, well-made film, even on the budget it's running on.
Oh, for sure.
It has limited sets a little bit, and it's obviously a lot of controlled kind of budgetary constraints at the edges, but you don't feel that too much unless you overthink it, which maybe we do.
Or you watch the film multiple times and realise that there are a huge number of continuity issues, or on the empty streets you'll still see people when there shouldn't be anybody there, but you have to be looking, and it's only on really repeat viewings that you start to spot all of those things. But what the intro of the film set up really well is that these two sisters, they're going to be isolated. At the party, she leaves the party because of what happened with her stepmother, and Regina ends up spending the night in the projection booth at the cinema that she works at. And they wake up the morning after the comet. We get to see the comet arriving, and we just get to see this big red glow. And
yeah, because they argue about the one thing I know in the projection room, they were arguing about Superman. He could see through steel, her boyfriend says, and she's like, "No, he doesn't. He can't see through. No, he can see through steel. He just can't see through lead." Well, she's like, "No, you've got it all wrong, Superman." So she's kind of a bit of a nerd and geeking out, and it's counter. She's almost counterintuitive to the classic stereotype damsel, where they're very girly. Her sister's more of the girly.
Yeah,
and you kind of got her as the more masculine of the two.
More assertive as well. Yeah.
But yeah, so they wake up, as you said, after the comet, and you do see the shot of the comet arriving, and her stepmom and the party that's at her house all look up, and then there's this lightning effect, which is
it's
dated,
very psychedelic.
but it's wonderfully psychedelic again. And then you swiftly see them all panic, rub their eyes, and then it cuts back to
the morning after.
Yeah.
And Regina, she's still with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's really upset that this guy hasn't brought this film back, so he heads off to go and find it.
That guy calls. You tell him I'm on my way over, and I'm very, 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 very pissed.
Hey, what about my $15?
Tell him you're pissed too.
And which leaves Regina on her own. She wanders around the cinema for a little bit and ends up getting locked out. So she ends up wandering around the back entrance to try and get in. She realizes that her boyfriend's motorcycle is still there. And that is when she gets attacked by our first on-screen Comet zombie. And again, we have that moment where she reveals to us that, she has that fake bravado, that fake sense of, I can defeat you, so please, I don't want to hurt you, but she's cowering and backing away, so you're just like, oh, here we go, she's going to need to be saved. But when the cannibal comes after her, she throws the keys away, and then she literally beats the crap out of him.
Yes, and then it's a clunky fight again. Not top stuntmen were involved.
Well, I mean, Catherine Mary Stewart did all of her own stunts in the film, so she's not a stunt actress, but she put in the physicality, and it was believable at least.
Yes, no. Like I said, again, I'm going to say this is more of the era, because again, fight sequences could seem a little wooden back in the day.
But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Some of the fight scenes, they do seem a little bit wonky, like some of the punches not really connecting.
But that's fine. Again, it's of the era.
Works.
I mean, and it's as good as any other. I mean, but again, like we said, I was going to only saying because considering they had one or two takes.
Yes, exactly.
On a lot of these, that does come across as pretty cool.
Now, I did say that she didn't have a stunt double, but she does have one stunt double in the film, and that is for the scene when we see her ride off on the motorcycle. Yeah. You can see her face is kind of out of focus, so you can't really tell that it's her. But then in the next shot, where it's the close-up of her with the the handlebars right in front of her, they literally put the bike on the back of a truck and then filmed it at an angle so it looks like she's riding along through the LA streets. So it's like, it was effective, they achieved it with very little.
Yeah, and at least again, it's not have to do it in a studio with like I can't remember how they used to do it with the screens behind them, the rolling footage, which looked otherworldly.
Yeah, but this is where we get our first real sense of the desolation that everybody has gone. We see a few remains of clothing. There's clothing everywhere, and there's this red dust also scattered everywhere. You immediately make the conclusion that people have been turned into this red dust.
She immediately picks up a pair of woman's knickers, looks confused. Then gets angry because she locked herself out of the cinema and storms off. And it is comedic.
She makes her way back, to the suburbs, back to her family home. We can see the remains of the partygoers. And she goes and finds her sister. And her sister is, of course, completely oblivious to everything that's happened and going on.
Because since was struck by her stepmother, she went and hid in the supply closet somewhere.
Yeah, which is a steel kind of encasing, so she's completely kind of safe.
Well, the safe aspect is a bit more confusing than that.
It is.
Because some people are just okay and other people are not. It's like 1% of the human race, maybe less, like 0.1%.
Turn into the cannibal zombie things.
Another 0.1% are alive and survive and just are like, it was fine.
It depends on how much exposure you had to the comet's, radiation or dust.
The dust going through their vents.
Right, exactly.
I mean, we'll get to that in a bit, but again, consistency, but I mean, it's not made clear, and the scientists make no effort to make it that clear. But it's not a problem. Again, it's a B movie of this sort where at least it's like light-hearted and kind of quirky. So you're like, I don't think they never intended to explain this in great detail to us. A comet went past the planet, a lot of people turned to dust.
Yeah,
it's good.
Where are the kids? It's Saturday morning. Where are the goddamn kids?
But, so you end up back at the party, and the older sister has now kind of clicked that this is all a bit apocalyptic.
She has to explain to her that everybody is gone, everybody is dead. And again, another great little moment where she goes outside and she's like, here's Doris. And she's emptying out the shoe of dust. And she's like, oh, and here's Chuck. I love the shot.
And her
where you
sister
see the
was
dust,
more...
and you can see all of the fake fingernails. It's just
Yes.
like,
The thing is the younger sister's more upset that the cute boy at school's gone.
yeah, there's no more cute boys to go dating with or make out with. It's like it sets up the characters really, really well. But they happen to hear like a radio station still broadcasting, so they're like, well,
Which sounds very oblivious to the apocalypse.
but they're still like, there's got to be somebody there unless it's automated. But we did also see those shots of like the automated sprinklers kicking in. We saw like the clown, the automated automatic clown dancing. It's just like the world is still ticking over, but there's just nobody there to control it anymore.
This film is clearly inspired by things like Day of the Triffin and stuff. Where
For sure.
A lot of people just die. Some people go blind in that particular movie, and it is really cool in the sense that it just captures that stillness.
The atmosphere of it is really well captured. Yeah.
The lack of noise. Where like we said, they shot this in busy cities, so clearly they've cut the noise in almost every single shot.
For sure.
But that works. It works. They're like these haunting, red tinted.
Yeah.
That's important to point out. Because the dust's in the air and it's killed everybody it's going to kill, but if it's not going to kill you, it hasn't killed you. So yeah, it's like you needed some protection, but maybe because anyone outside appears to have just instantly turned to dust.
Yeah.
But if you're inside and lucky, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
That's essentially the gist of it, I suppose. But yeah, at that point they kind of go to the station to look for the DJ and hope.
And of course the radio station is completely deserted. They see that it's automated. They see the pre-recorded tapes that are just ready to be played, and again there's there's a nod here to the original script's title, which was Teenage Mutant Comet Zombie.
Probably treading on toes.
And that's what Samantha says when she's on the radio, and it's just like, oh, that's a nice little thing that they did there. But they're kind of having fun. There is a moment when they're both sat outside, I think on the hood of a police car, and that's when they have that heartfelt moment where they really come to the conclusion that they are the only two people left. Like, there's no one else alive, and other than the cannibal zombies. But they don't seem to be numerous or very threatening.
No, and it's made clear later that they are also dying anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's a real quiet apocalypse.
We do cut then almost to the first time we get to see these scientists in this underground bunker.
Yes.
And it's a great miniature shot using forced perspective as well. And it's just like, that was really quite well done. It's most obvious when you have this giant military guard front or to the very left of the frame, and it's just like it you can tell, but it's still really well done. And we do get introduced to the scientists. We get introduced to Jeffrey Lewis, who plays Dr. Carter, and we get introduced to Mary Warrenoff, who plays Audrey White.
Jeffrey Lewis is probably the biggest actor out of this whole film. He's obviously famous for things like High Plains Drifter, Any Which Way But Loose.
He's definitely a megastar of the Western genre.
Yeah, and Juliette Lewis's dad, by the way.
Yeah.
People don't connect the dots. Unfortunately, passed away in the last few, I think 5 years ago. I think 2015-ish. Might be wrong, but he's got a hell of a repertoire of films.
Oh, hell yeah! And he also brings some gravitas to the situation, especially with the way he delivers his lines. But what we really get here is the explanation that even though they weren't directly impacted by the dust and that some got in, they're all starting to lose their memory bit by bit. And so sometimes they forget what they were writing, what they were saying, or what they were doing, or what it is they actually need to do. But they overhear a radio broadcast from Samantha, and so that triggers them to realize that there are other survivors out there, and they debate whether they should actually go and rescue people and bring them to this underground bunker.
Yeah, and then obviously the leader, Lewis, decides they should. They should go and get them. Obviously, things will become more complicated. But then we cut back to the girls, who have now just run into our other notable actor.
Yes, it's Robert Beltran of Star Trek Voyager fame.
Commander Chakotay.
Who turns up at gunpoint, threatening them at first. But then we soon discover that he has already run into these
Zombies.
Comet zombies, and so he wasn't taking any chances. But he soon becomes pretty friendly with them. Regina has a breakdown moment, and he goes and checks on her. You know, Samantha gets upset at one point because she thinks that her big sister is stealing all of her boyfriends, and so she's without a chance of making it now with Hector Gomez.
Yeah, a little floozy.
But we do then get a pretty cool sequence where she takes off. She gets in the car, she's drinking beer, and she's just like enjoying the apocalypse. And then we see the police lights on two police officers on motorcycles chasing behind her. She's like, oh, really? She has that panic moment where she throws the beer can behind her. She messes up her hair. And she's like, hello, officer. And then we find out that they're cannibal police officer zombies. And then she wakes up. Like, oh, okay, it was just a nightmare. And then she wanders into the bathroom and she takes off her top. And you're like, oh, is this... No, there's no nudity in this film. And then she gets jumped by the zombie cops again. Like, oh, it's a nightmare within a nightmare. Okay.
I know, that was pretty amusing meta, but and then she screams and wakes up and is consoled by her sister and her new friend.
Yeah.
Chakotay.
And so Chakotay's just like, look, I understand, things are bad here, but I've got to keep heading to Florida, I think it was. He's got family there, and he needs to go and make sure that they are okay. And actually, it wouldn't have been Florida, because it's on the other side of the country.
No, it's just another part of the city.
It's just another part of the city, yeah. Yeah, he needs to go and check on his family, because at least the two sisters know the fate of their family. He still wants to check on his mother and the rest of his family. So he's like, I will come back in a couple of days once I've been there and checked on them. And so the two girls are like, well, what do we do in the apocalypse? I know. Let's go shopping. The malls are open.
So then you get a montage of them running around just having fun.
Yes.
Which is nice.
Yeah, great pop songs, awesome montage.
I know
trying on clothes.
The soundtrack was probably most of the budget, I imagine, because again, songs...
Getting the licensing for those songs, for sure. But then we soon realise that there is something or someone nefariously watching them. It's an indoor, darkened room, and they're wearing sunglasses, so you're like, villain, obviously. Yeah. And he's watching them on the security monitors, and he soon announces to them that that they've broken in and that they need to purchase all of the things that they've picked up. So the two girls are like, hey, where do we leave that Mac 10? Go and get the guns. And then they soon get attacked. And we have a massive gunfight in this mall. There's gunfire everywhere. Things are exploding. Bullets. Hey.
It's a pretty fun little shootout.
Yes, yeah. It's a great moment where Samantha's like, I need to get to the high ground. She goes up to the top and she starts throwing televisions off the balcony at these gunmen.
Yeah, it was pretty weird.
There's some just great dialogue, and I think there's a moment where where Regina jumps over a counter. She's like, "Bummer," just like these 80s, lines. It's just great.
Yeah, no, it was cheesy and weird, and again, not the finest action ever put to film, but it was pretty solid.
Yeah,
I'll give it all that. Again, this film is generally pretty solid on these action scenes, as we said before.
Yeah,
it was fun.
But Samantha soon gets taken hostage. And he's asking Regina to surrender, and Regina at this point takes a hostage of one of the other gunmen, and she's like, "Look, we'll sort something out. You let my sister go, I'll let this guy go." And this psychopath is just like, no, just kills his own man.
Miss, you're not getting the point. I can't have you holding one of my people hostage.
He's like, no, I don't need that.
Because his man's like, no, man, should do it. So yeah, no, it's just like, yeah, I can drop him and drop you.
Exactly. Like... And so then both the sisters end up chained up in this basement.
Very Acme sort of chain.
Yeah.
Like, it is just, again, it's not saying cheapness, but it's something very 80s. Oh, it's just weird. It's comical. Again, it's the style of the film. It's just slightly... satirical.
It has that comic book feel to it in a way. It really does.
Yeah, and it's again that we've seen posters in this film for other films that it's clearly homaging, and when
Oh
you're in
yeah,
cinema,
the Death Race 2000, Red Dust, and a couple of others, and of course we mentioned Mary Warrenoff, who was also in Death Race 2000 and Chopping Mall, and you know, she was definitely in a lot of like successful or well remembered 80s horror movies.
This is a super B-movie cast, though. I mean, there's documentaries which some of these actors appear in because of their long-running heritage of being in predominantly horror films.
For sure.
I mean, like I said, the two male leads are slightly more divergent from horror.
So how will our girls get out of this situation? Well, they get rescued by the scientist team that turn up and literally just gun down all of these guys immediately. And it was also at this point that we realized, like, the guy that we saw with the computer terminals, he's turned into a Comet zombie. We could see when he takes his glasses off that his eyes have kind of sunken or, you know, gone to that like pale blue color, and that his skin's starting to peel. So we're like, oh, they were actually infected.
Well,
but
some
not,
of them were maybe, like,
but
his
to
friend
varying
might,
degrees.
Yeah, his friend might not have been. Again, this is the vague nature of the zombies. You get it with the scientists a little bit in a while, where a couple of them are suffering and then others seem to be fine, and you're like, okay, if everyone had just figured out the ones that were immune to this, it would have been okay. But
sure,
no, yeah, it is a little bit haphazard, this apocalypse. Really, it's fine, and you know, but that again is the lighthearted humor of this, where you kind of put aside, you're like, well, wouldn't it be rational? No. The script hasn't got time for that. This is too quick and lighthearted for that.
There was a nod to 80s commercialism at the point when the scientists turn up at the radio station, and they're just like, well, the girls aren't here. Where could they be? And the other scientist is just like, we know. Of course they've gone to the shopping mall. It's like, okay, it's again, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's fine. But they decide that they're going to take Regina back to the scientific base, the think tank base, but they're not going to be taking Samantha because she's shown that she's got an itch, she's got a rash, and that she therefore might possibly already be infected. So they're going to detain her here for now with the intention of actually killing her.
Yeah. It's a weird... again, it's sort of more villainy revealed, where beforehand you thought they were fairly nice. They were trying to get survivors together and you know, eke out the apocalypse.
But we soon find out when we go back to the scientific base that they have also got these children, that they are, and they've also got these blood donors, whether they were other survivors or other scientists that weren't infected. They've put them, you know, they've made them brain dead and literally keeping them alive so that they can harvest the blood from them as transfusions in order to keep these scientists healthy, so that they wouldn't succumb to the comet radiation.
They make people brain dead, though. That was the best bit. I was just like, why'd you make them brain dead? I mean, most people would be happy to donate blood if you're saving other humans' lives. I mean, it might be exhausting.
Well, I'm guessing it was against their will, you know?
Yeah.
It's just to show how nefarious and shady
I know what you're
scientists
saying,
are.
but it just seems crazy. Again, maybe they were going crazy, but it is a strange, amusing, weird, a little weirdery. Again, the motive for the scientists, as we said, were plot holes. It is a big hole. You know, none of it makes an awful lot of sense. But one of the female scientists who was questioning leaving the bunker initially, and now turns out to be more of the expedition, which was Mary Warrenoff's character. She she stays at the radio station and basically fills in the gaps.
Yeah, which was all improvised dialogue as well. Like, it wasn't really scripted. That was something that Mary Warrenoff had with the director. She was just like, I'll just improvise and come up with all of the lines. And she's the one who decides, you know, explains about the radiation or the dust coming through the ventilation.
Well, it makes sense, yeah.
And how there wasn't, you know, there's no real way to stop it. She's completely defeated. You know, she's got this little case there and she's filling up this needle and she's like, yeah, I'm just going to kill myself. You know, there's no hope. There's no rescue. There's no way out of this. I'm going to turn into one of those zombies. So lights out. And she kills herself. And she's like, oh, damn, that's brutal. And this is obviously at the point when Hector has returned back to the radio. You know, he had his own little side story where he did get home, found that his family had turned to dust. You know, he gets attacked by this kid.
Zombie kid, yeah, it was kind of cool.
A zombie kid who he manages to escape from.
Because initially I thought it was like young people were surviving it, but with the zombie kid, you kind of like, oh no, it's literally just a lottery.
It is at this point, yeah. But yeah, he comes back and he's the one who basically understands now what's going on. And he finds Samantha, who wasn't killed. She's still actually alive. And, you know, and she did explain that it wasn't the radiation from the comet. She just has these rashes when she's anxious or frightened or... it's an emotional response that she has.
Yeah.
And so they decide that they now need to go and find this military facility and go and rescue Regina, who's currently being interviewed by Jeffrey Lewis about like her sexual history, her pregnancy. He's basically finding out whether she's got any diseases or whether she's going to be good for the blood transfusions. Meanwhile, we cut to the two kids that are also being ready to be gassed and knocked out and be turned into blood donors as well.
I know, it's strange, but again, like we said, so you end up with the rescue, which is obviously kind of leading into it. A little bit of tongue-in-cheek kind of humour at the with the guard play and the Texas accents play with Chakotay as actor. And it's quirky again. It's just that strange, otherworldly, a little bit 80s. Everything's just so very 80s.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just all turned up to 1,000 with it was a strange decade.
So Regina manages to figure out what's going on, and she escapes her constraints and ends up fighting the guards, but she gets captured again, really just in time for Hector and Samantha to get in there and also rescue her. They also rescue the two kids as well.
Yep.
And they ask these scientists, like, what were you doing to these kids? And they're like, oh, we were about to go and see Santa Claus. It's like, oh, okay. And I love the moment when the scientists go into that room and the two female scientists have been tied up and gassed, and they've left the note on the side saying they've gone to see Santa Claus, and they're just in hysterics. It's just like, it was a good fun moment. But then there's gun shootouts in these very narrow, confined corridors.
Yeah, again, it's all pretty good for the budget.
Yeah.
And again, the science base sort of is, as you say, the sort of it's the trick. Well, you have the trick of the
forced perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and now they're doing sort of the same to make it feel bigger. It's not a big set. It's not a big facility.
It's just a couple of corridors and a couple of rooms.
Yeah,
they've made it feel bigger than it really is.
Yeah, it's a strange little bit. But again, they finally get outside the base and are about to drive off. But Hector's like, no.
I've got to flip the bird. So these scientists.
He's mocking them and
well, he's deliberately trying to provoke them so that they'll chase after them. Which, of course, they do. And at this point, we also realise that Dr. Carter, Jeffrey Lewis, has completely Comet zombied at this moment. And he's just like, start the car!
And then his co-pilot, his other scientist next to him, he looks perfectly fine.
He's just like, I can smell gas. What is that? Kaboom!
Yeah, and obviously...
giant fireball.
All the villains explode into fireballs.
Yes.
And the 5 now survivors
they drive away. And we catch up with them now in the cityscape. They're taking Polaroids of the kids.
All redressed and strange, weird.
She's just like, we've got to rebuild society. We are now the foundations of what's to come. And they're waiting to cross the road. And they're like, we can't cross until the green man says we can. And Samantha's like, what are you doing, you bloody lunatics? There's no cars. There's no people. We're in a ghost town. And she runs across the road. And then out of nowhere, a car is coming at them. It's like, what?
I know. It's a fun cut. Again, it's gentle comedy.
It is.
And it's
it turns out to be a teenage boy. And he's just like, hey, how are you doing? She's like, oh. She's like, hey, do you want to go for a ride? She's like, I thought you'd never ask. And jumps right into the car. And Regina's just like, hey, wait a minute. You can't go driving off with this random boy. I think it's Hector's just like, we don't even know who he is. Who are you? He explains that he is Danny Mason Keener. And they're just like, oh, that's all right then. Just make sure you're back by midnight. Okay. And we watch the car drive off. And then we see the license plate. DMK. And you're like, it ties back to the guy who got the high score on the arcade machine.
He got 6th place and she couldn't handle it. And again, it's all lighthearted. I mean, in any serious scenario, you'd be a bit more concerned your 16-year-old sister's driving off with a guy you've never met in an apocalypse, but I guess this is that sort of film, which is just like, nah, he isn't a bad guy. We would have made it clear. For
sure.
So yeah, it's a wonderful, quirky, strange little film ending that it works. The whole film's just a genial adventure like that. It's kind of got this kind of feeling of not caring too much.
Yeah. Well, Jess, what were your favourite scenes from the film?
I personally liked... I think, again, it's the scenes where everyone turns to dust. I mean, and the dead silence that follows when you the next morning. It's just really well done on a controlled, low-budget film like this. They understood how to use the camera and the film and lighting techniques to make it as atmospheric and unique, because this film has affected people. I mean, it certainly has been referenced by so many people, from Neil Gaiman to Josh Whedon. It's certainly for a film that is essentially an 80s low-budget B-movie, it's certainly bled across into many, many other people's minds. And I think it's the visuals. Again, the younger sister is dressed as a cheerleader for most of this. And as you said before, that inspired the Buffy the Vampire Slayer franchise, as well as the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, obviously. But it's the kind of dizzy cheerleader, but her very switched-on sister. And you can kind of see those two meld into what that is Buffy, essentially. And I think that's generally the show as a whole. I mean, there are some good bits. I mean, shootouts are good. The zombie makeup, as I said, isn't terrible. And in any scene they're in, I'm trying the bike where she drives up to the, as you say, really feels good when she's on the bike. But the bit where she drives up next to a car, looks in, and there's still a radio, just music playing in the car.
Yeah.
And again, like the stations are playing on automated, perhaps. I mean, and the car's still running. So it's kind of this wonderful, haunted, empty scape. And I mean, sure, as you said, if you look hard enough, you'll spot the odd person on the streets or car in the far, far, far distance. But again, I switch off your brain and try not to focus on those things. And it's pretty good. I mean, I liked every bit of it. I mean, I liked the opening at the cinema, which again, with all the homage to all the films that were inspiring it, clearly.
For sure.
Her boss at the cinema grumbling that she's stealing popcorn and playing computer games. And again, it's just wholesome. It felt fun, and he wasn't going to fire her, but he's going to fire the stupid guy in the projection room. And I'm like, sexism.
Well, I think the entire film is really memorable. It's really hard to pick out some great moments, but these are the ones that I really enjoyed. I love the car scene with the Mac 10s. And she's blasting away at the car, and the gun keeps jamming. And then she's like, "Daddy would have gotten us Uzis." Which, again, was one of those improvised lines that, because the gun kept jamming, and the director went, "Just roll with it if it jams again." And she improvised that line. I was like, this is just a great, great moment. I love the "here's Doris" dust scene. She's emptying out the shoe. And then here's her boyfriend, Chuck.
Well, these girls were pretty good. I mean, again, considering it was an ensemble cast of just ad-libbing a lot, I mean, I did feel that it was a really well put together. I mean, a lot of these actors, I said, were prior to this and a lot after this. B-movie horror. I mean, that you could tell almost their professionalism.
For sure. I love the mall montage, the music, the gun shootout.
It really couldn't have bled over more 80s, that mall, and all the different styles.
Yeah. I love the interview scene with the scientist where, he keeps asking the same question and she's just like not paying any attention to him and just saying, and just asking other questions. The moment where she's just like, I'm cancer. And he's like, "What? You have cancer?" And she's like, "No, I am a cancer." It was just so witty and so playful, and it just really, really set her character up even more.
Again, the sass was, as you say, was 80% of her character. She's sassing her boss, who won't fire her but will fire the projectionist.
Right.
Again, it's just like, a pretty girl being sassy apparently can get away with it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say this is all throughout the best actors in the world being the best actors, but I think they all do a good enough job, and they've got the charisma, which is something
Absolutely.
I think a lot of films now and then talk about leading men and women, and there is a reason certain people hold the cinema.
It's also the chemistry that the two leads have with each other.
Yes.
They've become best friends, since the film, and still hang out together.
Yes.
Because of that energy, and you see it on screen as well.
Yeah, I felt that everybody in the film seemed to be having fun.
Yes.
Which I think maybe the pressures of filmmaking, and also the pressure taken off by, we're not going to take this shot 50 times, which in a lot of movie making you get strained, especially the famous stories about Kubrick.
I was going to say, yeah.
The Kubrick levels of strain you had with where he demands every shot 50 times and holds you to it. But a lot of other directors, even though they're a bit less crazy as Kubrick, will still pressure a lot of shots from actors and try to get that perfect.
They got the vision. They know what they want.
I must have perfection. And again, it's the nature of art. Anybody painting or writing or making films, the perfectionist is the devil on your back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in this, having that removed almost creates a more free-flowing, slightly more crazy energy to the film.
Absolutely.
And I think that's throughout. I mean, the bit in the street where they're just dicking around, even if the script, I don't know what the script said on that page, but they just did what they wanted to do, where they're all going to work. It could have literally just been stage acting. Again, like I said, Chakotay actor, he's an actor, so again, maybe he's happy to do some more improvisational roles, and that seems to be what they're all having such great fun doing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, Jess, do you recommend Night of the Comet?
Yeah. It's a piece of the 80s. Watch it. It was inspired by more of the 80s and clearly inspired the 90s in many ways. It's creative, visually interesting. The soundtrack, the way the soundtrack's used and it works. I mean, honestly, it is a really well put together film. It just works. I mean, I would recommend it to everybody.
Well, how can I not recommend Night of the Comet? This film is so much fun to watch. It's very cheesy, it's really campy, and it has great tongue-in-cheek humour, but it also retains the reality of the situation. This is also a fantastic nostalgia trip to the mid-80s, with great pop songs, wild haircuts and locations, and the film does an excellent job of evoking or parodying all of the sci-fi movies of the 50s and 60s. The film really balances that line between horror and comedy really well, and writer-director Thom Eberhardt created a true cult classic with a sharp and witty script and brilliantly executed it. The two leads, Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelli Maroney, were fantastic in the roles and perfectly cast. Such charm and personality, they make this film so rewatchable. Robert Beltran, Mary Warrenoff and Jeffrey Lewis were also great to watch and supported the two leads really, really well. It may not be super gory, but it has its moments of horror, and the effects seem cheap, but incredible within the budget. I highly recommend you watch Night of the Comet. It was made with love, and truly a passion project that deserves to be seen and enjoyed. It's wonderfully camp, highly entertaining, and light-hearted. Oh, and it's also a Christmas movie too. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
Bye-bye now.